Why does a man in a suit driving a Cadillac become a suspect for no reason? On a quiet Tuesday morning, Marcus Evans, a respected judge, stopped at a rest area on I-75 near Atlanta, Georgia, unaware his life was about to change. A single glance from a passing officer sparked a chain of events that would ripple far beyond that moment. It wasn't just about him. It was about a deeper truth we all face. What happens when justice itself is judged by appearance? The sun hung low, casting a golden glow over the Georgia pines. Marcus sat in his sleek black Cadillac Escalade, reviewing notes for a meeting with the governor. His navy suit was crisp, his demeanor calm, a man who'd spent 15 years upholding the law. He didn't notice the state trooper's cruiser easing into the lot, its lights silent but watching. A soft breeze carried the hum of distant traffic, the world moving on as Marcus prepared for his day. Then came the sharp wail of a siren, slicing through the morning. Marcus looked up, his steady gaze meeting the cruiser's flashing lights. In that split second, a routine stop became something else entirely. A moment that would test his strength and reveal a wound still unhealed. Marcus Evans lowered his window, his hands steady on the wheel, the hum of the Cadillac's engine fading into the morning air. Officer Derek Lawson stood tall, his shadow stretching across the rest area's gravel. His eyes, sharp and unyielding, scanned Marcus like a puzzle he'd already solved. "We got a report of a stolen SUV, black, like this one," Lawson said, his voice clipped, no room for doubt. Marcus blinked, confusion flickering across his face, but his tone stayed even. "I'm not aware of any report, officer. My registration's in the glove box if you need it." Lawson's hand rested on his holster, a silent command. "Step out of the vehicle." The words hung heavy, laced with an authority that didn't ask for questions. Marcus paused, not out of fear, but from the weight of a moment he'd seen play out too many times in his courtroom. He knew the law, lived by it, but here, it seemed to bend under the officer's gaze. A young woman nearby, unnoticed by Lawson, raised her phone, her fingers trembling as she pressed record. The Georgia sun climbed higher, but the air felt colder now, charged with something unspoken. Marcus Evans stepped out of his Cadillac, his navy suit catching the Georgia sunlight, every movement deliberate, calm, like a man who'd faced 1,000 storms. Officer Derek Lawson's voice cut through the air, sharp as a blade. "Hands up now!" The command echoed across the rest area, silencing the hum of distant cars. Marcus raised his hands, his gaze steady, unflinching, even as Lawson circled the vehicle, his boots crunching gravel. Without a word, Lawson leaned into the Cadillac, rummaging through papers, tossing Marcus's leather portfolio aside. "I do not consent to a search," Marcus said, his voice clear, firm, a judge's authority wrapped in quiet resolve. Lawson spun, eyes narrowing. "That's obstruction," he snapped, yanking Marcus's arm behind his back. The cold snap of handcuffs clicked shut, biting into Marcus's wrists. A small crowd gathered, travelers pausing, their whispers barely audible. "He doesn't look like a thief," one muttered. A young woman, her phone still raised, captured every second, her breath catching as Lawson shoved Marcus toward the cruiser. Marcus walked tall, his dignity a shield against the weight of suspicion. The morning air grew heavy, charged with a truth too many had ignored for too long. The air in the Atlanta precinct felt stale, heavy with the hum of radios and the clatter of keyboards. Marcus Evans sat on a hard plastic chair, his navy suit still crisp despite the red marks circling his wrists from the cuffs. His eyes, steady and focused, traced the room, not in anger, but in quiet calculation, as if measuring the distance between justice and this moment. Officer Derek Lawson strode past, his glance sharp, mocking. "Stay put. Don't make trouble," he said. his voice carrying the weight of assumed guilt. Marcus spoke, his tone calm, deliberate. "I'd like to call my office. I have a meeting with the governor." The words landed softly, but Lawson ignored them, turning away. A younger officer, Emily Carter, lingered nearby, her eyes flickering with unease, yet she said nothing. The precinct buzzed with routine, phones ringing, officers muttering, but Marcus sat apart, a man whose silence spoke louder than any protest. He'd seen this scene before, not from this chair, but from the bench, hearing stories of men judged by their skin, not their actions. A clock ticked loudly, each second stretching the injustice further. Outside, the world moved on, unaware of the storm brewing within these walls. Marcus Evans sat still, his hands resting on the plastic chair, the precinct's fluorescent lights casting faint shadows across his face. The hum of radios and muffled voices filled the stale air, but his gaze remained steady, a quiet force that seemed to hold the room in check. Officer Derek Lawson lingered near the door, his earlier swagger dulled, sensing something he couldn't name. Marcus had asked again, his voice clear, measured, to contact his office. But the request hung unanswered, dismissed by the precinct's routine. A clock on the wall ticked relentlessly, marking nearly 2 hours of waiting, each second a reminder of the indignity he endured. Across the room, Sergeant Karen Brooks, her hair neatly pinned, stepped toward a computer, her boots soft but firm on the linoleum floor. She typed Marcus's name, expecting little, a routine check, another name in the system. The screen flickered, and her eyes narrowed as a cascade of credentials spilled forth. Marcus Evans, presiding judge of Georgia's 5th District Court, 15 years of service, academic honors, a pillar of the law. Her breath caught, and she glanced through the glass at Marcus, his calm unbroken, as if he'd known this moment would come. She typed again, confirming the photo, the reality sinking in like a stone. Brooks stood, her movements quick now, crossing the precinct to where Marcus sat. "Judge Evans," she said, her voice low, almost reverent. "This is a grave mistake." The room seemed to pause, the air shifting as Lawson froze, his confidence cracking. Emily Carter, the younger officer, looked up, her face paling as the truth dawned. Marcus met Brooks's gaze, his nod slight, deliberate, carrying the weight of a man who'd seen justice bend, but never break under his watch. He didn't speak, didn't need to. His silence was louder than any accusation. The precinct's buzz faltered, officers glancing over, sensing the shift. Brooks's apology hung in the air, sincere but heavy with the knowledge that this was no simple error. It was a fracture in the system Marcus had sworn to uphold, a system that had turned on him without cause. He adjusted his suit jacket, the motion small but deliberate, reclaiming the dignity the cuffs had tried to strip away. The truth was out now, but the weight of what had happened lingered, a question not just of one man's honor, but of a deeper wound that demanded reckoning. The precinct's walls seemed to close in as Marcus Evans waited, his dignity unshaken despite the hours stolen from him. Outside, the world was igniting. A shaky 30-second video, captured by a young woman at the rest area, raced across screens, from TikTok to Twitter, Instagram to local news feeds. It showed Marcus, hands raised, cuffed, his voice steady as he asked what he'd done wrong, while Officer Derek Lawson's harsh commands cut through the Georgia morning. The caption read, "Judge or not, he was just a black man to them." Hashtags, #justice. For Marcus, I-75 injustice sprang up, shared by thousands, then millions. Comments flooded in, some outraged, others skeptical, whispering about a past case where Marcus's strict ruling had sparked a lawsuit. Was this arrest retaliation, they wondered, or something uglier? The question hung, divisive, fueling debates in group chats and newsrooms. In a cramped Atlanta office, Maya Thompson, a young reporter with fire in her eyes, watched the video loop on her laptop. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, piecing together Marcus's story, his 15 years on the bench, his reputation for fairness. She dug deeper, unearthing the old lawsuit, a case where Marcus's tough sentence had stirred controversy. Her article hinted at a connection, sparking murmurs online, but Maya kept searching, determined to find the truth. The video's views climbed past 2 million by dusk, each share a spark in a growing fire. Protesters gathered outside the precinct, their signs bold. No justice, no peace. A retiree, his voice gruff, told a local reporter, "That man looked like he was headed to a boardroom, not a cell." The air buzzed with anger, but also with hope, as community leaders called for answers. Maya's phone pinged with notifications. Her article was gaining traction, but so was the controversy over Marcus's past. Some claimed he'd been targeted for his rulings, a theory she hadn't yet disproved. Yet the video told a clearer story. Marcus's calm, his refusal to break, even as Lawson's assumptions stripped him of his title. Social media amplified every detail: his pressed suit, the glint of cuffs, the young woman's trembling voice narrating the injustice. In coffee shops and living rooms, people watched, shared, argued. The lawsuit rumor swirled, a distraction to some, a revelation to others, but Maya's instincts pushed her to keep digging. She found no link, no evidence tying Marcus's past to Lawson's actions, only the raw truth of a moment rooted in bias. As night fell, the precinct grew quiet, but the world outside roared. Marcus's name was no longer just his own. It was a call, a challenge, a mirror held up to a system that had failed him and so many others for far too long. The clamor of Atlanta's streets faded as Marcus Evans stepped into the grand hall of Georgia's state capitol, his navy suit sharp against the marble floors. His leather portfolio, once tossed aside by Officer Lawson, rested firmly in his hand, a quiet symbol of his reclaimed authority. The room, filled with lawmakers, reporters, and policy experts, hushed as he entered, their eyes tracing his steady stride. He wasn't here for vengeance. He was here for something greater. Marcus took his seat at the head of a long oak table, the governor across from him, his nod heavy with respect. The air carried the weight of expectation, of a moment that could shift the course of justice. Marcus cleared his throat, his voice calm, resonant, cutting through the room's tension. "Yesterday I was handcuffed on I-75, not for what I did, but for how I looked. This isn't just my story. It's a story too many know by heart." Heads nodded, a young assemblywoman's eyes glistening with quiet emotion. The governor leaned forward, his face etched with concern, as Marcus continued. "I've spent 15 years on the bench, upholding the law, believing in its promise. But yesterday, the law looked at me and saw only suspicion." The words landed like stones, each one deliberate, unyielding. Reporters scribbled furiously, their pens scratching against notepads, capturing every syllable. Marcus spoke of trust, of how it crumbles when those sworn to protect act on prejudice instead of evidence. His tone never wavered, never rose to anger, but carried the weight of a man who'd seen the system's flaws from both sides. The room felt smaller, the air thicker, as he described the cuffs, the precinct, the hours of silence. Yet he didn't linger on his own pain. He turned it outward, calling for change, training, oversight, accountability. "We can't keep asking people to trust a system that fails them," he said, his gaze sweeping the table. A policy expert nodded, jotting notes. A civil rights leader in the back clapped softly. The governor promised action, his voice firm but shaken, as if Marcus's words had stirred something deep. Outside, the crowd grew, their signs waving under the Georgia sun, demanding justice not just for Marcus, but for all. Maya Thompson, the young reporter, sat in the corner, her laptop open, her latest post already trending. She'd cleared the air about Marcus's past lawsuit, proving it unrelated, but his speech now carried a truth beyond rumors. It was about dignity, about a system that needed to see people, not profiles. Marcus's voice softened, but his resolve didn't. This isn't about one man, one arrest. It's about building a world where no one fears a badge because of their skin. The room erupted in applause, not loud, but reverent, a recognition of a man who turned pain into purpose. Marcus sat back, his face calm, his eyes fixed on a future he was determined to shape. The air in the Capitol's lower chamber felt taut, the hum of anticipation replacing the precinct's stale buzz. Marcus Evans sat at the center of a polished wooden bench, flanked by two fellow judges, his navy suit a quiet anchor in the room's charged atmosphere. His eyes, steady and resolute, surveyed the packed chamber, reporters with notepads, state staff whispering, and a handful of community members who'd fought to be there. Officer Derek Lawson stood before the panel, his earlier bravado gone, his jaw tight as he shifted under the weight of scrutiny. Beside him, Officer Emily Carter kept her gaze on the floor, her hands clasped, as if bracing for a truth she couldn't escape. Marcus's voice, calm but unyielding, opened the session. "We're here to evaluate conduct, to measure actions against the standards of law and human decency." The words settled over the room, each syllable deliberate, cutting through the tension. He didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. His authority came from years on the bench, now sharpened by the sting of injustice. The panel reviewed the evidence: grainy body camera footage, the young woman's viral video, witness statements from the rest area. Lawson's report claimed protocol, but the footage told a different story. His hand on his holster, his search without consent, his dismissal of Marcus's rights. Marcus leaned forward, his question measured but piercing. "Why did you ignore his request for a phone call?" Lawson stumbled, muttering about departmental discretion, his voice thin, unconvincing. Emily, when pressed, admitted she hadn't checked Marcus's ID, her words faltering as she glanced at him, shame flickering in her eyes. The room grew still, the only sound the scratch of pens and the faint hum of a ceiling fan. Outside, protesters stood silent, their signs: justice for Marcus, dignity over bias, a backdrop to the chamber's gravity. Marcus remained professional, his face a mask of impartiality, but his questions carried the weight of experience. "What cause justified the cuffs?" he asked, his tone steady, forcing Lawson to confront his assumptions. The officer's answers unraveled, his confidence crumbling under cross-examination. The panel's deliberation was brief but thorough, each judge's nod a step toward clarity. Marcus read the ruling, his voice clear, unwavering. Officers Lawson and Carter acted with negligence, violating protocol and the rights of an individual. We recommend suspension without pay, pending a full investigation. The chamber held its breath, Lawson's face pale, Emily's eyes fixed on the floor. Reporters typed furiously, capturing the moment. Marcus's gaze swept the room, not triumphant but resolute, a man who'd turned his own pain into a call for accountability. The ruling wasn't just about him. It was a line drawn, a promise that casual abuses of power would no longer go unchecked. As the officers were escorted out, the crowd outside parted, their silence louder than any shout. Marcus sat back, his hands folded, his dignity intact, knowing this was only the beginning of a longer fight. The Georgia sun softened, casting a warm glow over the training fields of the State Police Academy. Marcus Evans stood before a sea of new recruits, 60 young faces in crisp uniforms, their eyes locked on him, not with fear, but with a readiness to listen. His navy suit was gone, replaced by a simple blazer, but his presence carried the same quiet strength. "You're not just here to enforce laws," he said, his voice steady, resonant, filling the open air. "You're here to protect dignity, every person's, no matter who they are." The recruits nodded, some subtly, others deeply, absorbing the weight of his words. Marcus spoke of the rest area, of the cuffs, of a system that too often sees skin before character. He didn't accuse, he taught, his tone calm, urging them to see each citizen as someone's father, sister, neighbor. The Academy's flags fluttered softly, a breeze carrying the promise of change. Beyond the fields, Georgia was shifting. Town halls buzzed with citizens demanding reform. Precincts rolled out new training on bias and de-escalation. Maya Thompson's final article had cleared the air, proving Marcus's past lawsuit was no excuse for his arrest, silencing doubters. Her words, shared across screens, fueled the fire for accountability. Marcus paused, his gaze sweeping the recruits, seeing in their eyes a seriousness that hadn't been there before. "I could have been bitter," he continued, "but bitterness builds nothing. Purpose does." A young black recruit in the front row nodded, his expression fierce, as if Marcus's words had lit something within him. Community leaders now held workshops, legal clinics offered free counsel, and an independent oversight board was forming, all sparked by one man's refusal to break. Marcus's voice softened, but his resolve held firm. "You'll wear a badge, but it's not a shield. It's a responsibility. See people, not profiles." The recruits stood straighter, their silence a pledge. As Marcus stepped back, the Academy director shook his hand, her nod one of respect, not ceremony. Across the state, the ripple grew. Policies rewritten, conversations started, trust slowly rebuilt. Marcus's story wasn't just his anymore. It was a call to action, a reminder that change begins in the choices made when the world isn't watching. The recruits filed out, their boots steady on the grass, carrying his words into a future they'd help shape. Marcus lingered, watching them go, his heart steady with a quiet hope that justice might rise on a new foundation. The golden light of a Georgia sunset spilled through Marcus Evans's window, softening the edges of his modest home. He sat in a worn leather chair, a book of law open on his lap, its pages marked by years of study. His eyes, steady and thoughtful, gazed out at the small garden where fireflies began to flicker. The world outside hummed with life. Children laughed in a nearby park. Neighbors chatted over fences, a community bound by shared hopes and struggles. Marcus's journey hadn't ended at the Capitol or the Academy. It had woven itself into the fabric of countless lives. His arrest, the cuffs, the viral video, they were no longer just his story, but a mirror held up to a nation still wrestling with its promises. He'd stood firm, not for himself alone, but for those who'd never have a camera watching, a title to shield them, or a voice to be heard. The reforms he'd sparked, new training, oversight boards, community dialogues, were seeds now taking root. Maya Thompson's articles kept the fire alive, her words a beacon for truth. Marcus turned a page, his fingers tracing the worn paper, a quiet act of faith in the law he'd sworn to uphold. Across Georgia, people gathered in town halls, their voices rising, demanding a system that sees them as human first. The recruits he'd spoken to carried his words like a compass, each step a chance to rebuild trust. Marcus didn't seek applause or headlines. His strength lay in the small, steady choices. Listening, teaching, standing tall when the world tried to bend him. He thought of the young black recruit, the fire in his eyes, and felt a spark of hope. Justice wasn't a word carved in stone. It was a living thing, shaped by every hand that reached for it. The evening air grew cooler, carrying the scent of blooming jasmine. Marcus closed his book, his heart full, not with triumph, but with purpose. We all have a role, he'd said, and he believed it still. Every choice, to speak, to listen, to act, built a foundation stronger than fear. Share this story. Let it echo through your own life. Subscribe to Black Echoes, where voices like Marcus's remind us change starts with us, in the quiet moments, when we choose dignity over division, fairness over silence. Together, we can make justice rise.